United States of America, the land of optimism and gratifying luxury. Now tender into turmoil and devastation. Millions scour through desperation, digging under the rubble they once called home, in search for the smallest inkling of hope and prosperity on the East Coast. Citizens must endure long hours in extreme conditions for a bowl of soup and a loaf of bread. On the West Coast, the Golden State continues to strive to lighten the hearts of many with motion pictures. And right smack dab in the middle of poverty and starvation, crime has a new face. The machine gun wielding bandits. Babyface Nelson, Pretty Boy Floyd, John Dillinger, who outsmart law enforcement at every turn.
It really is quite spectacular of how far technology has come since the invention of the light bulb in 1803. My 3 times great-grandpa, Grandpa Kenneth, was born in 1874. He was an inventor himself, but he was ridiculed for many of the devices he created. I found this hard to believe at first, but he attempted to make the first lava lamp in 1907. 56 years before the real one was made. My great-great-grandpa Seamus told me he was 8 at the time, and his dad said, "Come here over here, Seamus. Help me out with this." And instead of using oil and water, he used glycerol, nitric acid, and alcohol, and he began heating it in the barn. How he got a hold of those chemicals, nobody knows. If you're not a chemist, which my Grandpa Kenneth was not, glycerol and nitric acid create sulfuric acid. And when sulfuric acid is heated, but also mixed with alcohol, but then came the summer of 1936. A man by the name of Nathaniel Marker Trent was arrested for abducting a woman in Lansing, Michigan. She got away when he wasn't looking. And in the station, to my grandpa, he did not bother neglecting what his intentions were. Like, he basically gave a story of where he first saw her, where he picked her up, what he said to her, how she begged him to let her go. And then when he went to fill his car up, she ran to the hotel across the street, and they called the police. But if she didn't get away,
I'm here with Kenneth O'Donovan. He's with us to discuss his experience he had when he had a face-to-face conversation with the notorious Nathan Trent.
That's Nathaniel Marker Trent.
Right.
Yeah, he has been in my head for the past 2 decades. And that phrase he said was, "I prefer to use my full name."
And can you tell us why that is?
I plan on it if you let me finish.
when Trent was arrested, he didn't seem all that much different from your average criminal. But as time passed, it was national news. People came from all over the country. It took the Hindenburg disaster to make people forget about him for a while.
He was, by definition, a mass murderer on a national scale. 20 lads and lassies between the ages of 16 and 34 in 10 different states. It was unheard of.
And to this day, it's still unheard of. No one can understand the reasons and motives for doing these horrific acts.
He was a menace and a ruthless villain with no conscience. No moral understandings of human nature. My longtime friend Georgie Partridge, God rest his soul, studied and made the definition that we now call a sociopath.
Trent became known as the Butcher of these United. He was an extremely disturbing individual. He makes Ted Bundy seem like Raggedy Ann playing with a slinky. My grandpa had recently made an invention that, quite frankly, wasn't all that new. It would be what we call a tape recorder. However, he made one that's like the ones we have now. It was basically a cassette tape recording device. It was small. It worked efficiently. Sound? Eh. Sadly, it was destroyed in a house fire, and we don't have any pictures of it, but it basically looks like your average cassette player. Now, my grandpa took this opportunity to use it for a very long duration and decided to interview the Butcher of these United.
He did have quite the sense of humor, and he was quite a charmer as well. He was a very smart man. Disturbingly smart.
the way he spoke was very different from everybody else. Much more intelligent from a person of his wealth at the time. Trent developed a habit of following the news of a certain radical right group in Germany rising to power.
Wir haben bewiesen in diesen 3 Jahren, dass wir ein Volk sind, das bestehen kann vor den anderen. Und darum bitte ich dich nun, deutsches Volk, darüber gib nun dein Urteil ab. Der Welt unterstelle ich mich nicht, die kann mich nicht richten.
Trent had a lot of knowledge in general. But one thing that he was not open to was other races being a part of this world.
You could say he was the embodiment of a killer Hitler. But bear in mind, Hitler did not kill anyone personally, except in the Great War. But if he did, Nathaniel Martyr Trent would be just that. His answers were they had parable qualities.
At the time, no one knew the scale of his onslaught of weak Americans making their way through the country. People were found, but they were never connected to one person because they were so scattered. Had anyone known? I'm not sure if whether or not my grandpa would have passed up the opportunity to meet Trent, or be more eager to.
then he just opens up. After 15 minutes, he starts talking about his life.
Trent eventually gives my grandpa his childhood story. When I listened to the tapes, it sounded like he was exaggerating some of it, if not most. And if I had a thought, if he were to go through a psychoanalysis today, he would be diagnosed as a delusional narcissistic sociopath.
As intelligent as he was, I wanted to smack him so hard he would remember his father.
Oh man, that is probably my favorite quote from him. He was not the type of guy who would take pressure well. If anyone over and over and over again tried to convince him to be something, do something, believe in something, he would break out into a fight. Or at least that's what my great-great-grandpa Seamus told my great-grandpa Patrick, who told me.
Very, very early on in his life, he realized he was a killer, a monster, something that was built on the statue of his father's morals. His father beat him and his sisters because something that was right or eclipsed him was wrong. And Nathaniel Marker Trent had the exact same principles. He did not have any favorite quality as anyone else would. No favorite color, food, book, nothing. And someone like him that would come to no surprise to anyone. He was the pure absence of human quality. After the first meeting, I could not sleep. What intrigued me was the urged knowledge of what this man had done. He could have told the authorities that abducting Miss Thompson was a mistake, but he did not. He implied that there were several others, but for a time he declined to tell anyone where and when these events took place. That is what created such a fuss. No criminal in history at the time, but aside from bank robbers, have convinced the police that they had done more than what they had been arrested for.
If there were moments in my grandpa's life that made him who he was later on, it were those interviews with Trent.
A small portion of my childhood, yes. We go to church as
There was quite a bit of silence after he said that.
You looked me in the eye with such evil. I could see that he had done things to human beings that would make Vlad the Impaler roll in his grave. The hairs on me neck stood up quicker than they ever had.
What did he say to you?
You know the story. I was just the first person to hear it.
Grandpa Kenneth went home and had an experience that my Grandpa Seamus would describe as something someone would be like after exercising for an extended period of time. Sweating, breathing heavy, and trembling. What he was describing was an anxiety attack. And in 1936, Grandpa Kenneth was lucky he wasn't sent to a mental institution because he would have been diagnosed with pantophobia. And he would have been given insulin shock therapy. Trent would have been responsible for giving my grandpa brain damage for the rest of his life if the treatment didn't kill him.
My wife, Martha, God bless her, she heard the tapes that I brought home with me so she could understand why I was acting the way I was. She understood, but could never understand the gravity of sitting across the creature that spoke those words. Overnight, I made copies of the tapes. The next morning, I was going to hand them over to the police. Well, I had a feeling that that man would tell the police everything. Perhaps almost everything.
And he did. It made national news.
A man in Lansing, Michigan is being held for abducting a young woman, but now has come forward, claiming to have killed nearly 20 citizens across the country. We will give you more details as they develop.
It was staggering of how monstrous this story became. All around the country, people gathered to listen to the court radio stations to hear the proceedings. For weeks, there was hardly anyone on the street. And this was in the later years of the Great Depression, mind you. I interviewed him several more times before the trials were broadcasted over the radio in August of 1937. That's when the real disturbing details came to light.
He wanted to be the smartest person in the room. And in a way he was, but not as smart as the lawyers the state put against him.
The prosecution was led by Terence Houston. He was a kind gentleman and professionally astounding at his job. And no one got under Nathaniel Martin's skin more than Councillor Houston.
Because he was black.
One of the main reasons, yes. My father had little care for the colours. You can imagine a 30-year-old Irishman in the 1880s. Practically no sympathy if they were to be starving in the streets or beaten in the alley, hung from trees. Had no effect on my father. I, however, was disinterested, just overly monotonous of the ideal that non-whites had to be treated the way they were and still are to this day. They are great many people of different colours, for which they are still people, no different than you or I. My mother fought my father about the subject while we were living in South Carolina. She was a nurse, he a farmer. When typhus took her, that came as a sign to my father that we should relocate to a better place. In the end, he chose Michigan. I lived there from 1885 to 1939.
What made you leave? What made you leave?
The butcher of these United.
her. It didn't take her long to comprehend that something was off. She kept asking me questions irrelevant to the situation. That's when I told her what I was planning on doing to her. How did she get away? My car was running out of gas. Not ideal timing. I had to stop at a filling station. I told her that if she were to get out, I would shoot her, which was a lie. I don't have any guns. I went to pay the attendant. She got out and ran to the hotel across the street. They called the police and they eventually found me. They would have caught me later on if they were smart enough. My name is the Key.
I had not spoken to him for a while after, where he mentions that his name was the Key, due to the fact that the trial started immediately after.
What did that mean?
I did not know for a while until my next and final conversation with him took place. He said, "You have to understand, these were all premeditated," and he said he committed those crimes because it was a pleasure of his and not due to the significance of becoming famous or infamous. But that was a lie. He wanted people to know it was him. He just didn't expect them to find out it was him this early, if at all. He may have wanted to live as long as he could and relish in the gratification of the remarkable stain he left on history.
When the court proceedings started and Miss Thompson began her testimony, the whole country was listening. And when the whole country was listening to the details of what she had to say, cold cases started to surface from Arkansas, Rhode Island, Tennessee, Louisiana, Hawaii, Idaho, Nevada, Arizona, and California. Now, there was a whole jurisdiction thing that happened, but eventually everyone settled for Trent to be tried in Michigan.
How it was done back then was so different than today. And I'm sure it'll be different 20 years from now.
Did you go to the trial?
No. I had considered attending once or twice. But once Miss Thompson's testimony came to an end and all the cases arrived in court the next week, that's when the real trial began. Almost every story was the same. He was very acquainted with the community, attended church services, which I was under the impression that he had stopped going. He never did. He would lure his victims with kindness and a promise of a good night out. In the 1930s, that's all anyone ever cherished, was a good time due to the world being forcefully sucked down into madness and depression. He wore fancy clothes, which he purchased with his army pension to make him look like he was comfortable. And that brought attention to him immediately.
No one ever knew what happened to their neighbors, their friends, their family, until he was already out of the state. Once police started looking around, he bolted.
A majority of the victims were found not far from their homes. They were not secluded from the open. He made sure their bodies were found. At least 3 of them were found by children. Just imagine coming upon such a sight. You would never want to go outside ever again.
After Trent had stabbed his victim in the heart, he proceeded to cut off the ears, gouge out the eyes, and rip out the tongue. After all that, he would spray Dunhill cologne on the body, which was very potent and recognizable. That's what won the prosecution the case against Nathaniel Marker Trent, the butcher of these United. When police found Dunhill cologne in his apartment, Miss Thompson's testimony, documentation of Trent's whereabouts around the times the victims went missing, and the cologne.
It took a while for me to come forward with his tapes. I submitted them to the court, the judge listened to them, and not long after, the jury listened to them. Those tapes really gave the jury an idea of how Nathaniel Marker Trent's brain functioned. In the end, Nathaniel Marker Trent was found guilty of 19 counts of murder in the first degree, 1 count of abduction with the intent of murder in the first degree. The sentencing would carry out a week later.
But the sentencing never came.
No, it did not. I went to see him after the trial, not knowing that it would be the last time we ever spoke.
I never saw you at the trial. My wife needed me. She was ill. Is she feeling better? In time. I'm sure she will. Were you hoping that I would receive a guilty verdict? I was expecting it. I had it figured when the evidence piled up.
mind, would you hand me that folded piece of paper on the mantelpiece to your right? No, yes, that one. Careful. Thank you. This contains one Nathaniel Marker Trent wrote me on August 13th, 1937. Oh, people will be able to see this when you have camera in focus. People will be able to see it. Yeah. Each state has a certain quantity of victims. The first letter of each state and the number of victims correlate with the letters in his name. Nevada starts with N. He killed 3 people in Nevada, and his name has 3 N's. And that goes with each state. Now you and I, we spell out our names with a pen, a pencil, or even a typewriter. But he spelled out his name with murder.
On August 18th, 1937, the unexpected happened.
Nathaniel Marker Trent, the butcher of these United escaped from Lansing jail. That was the most disturbing news that I had heard since the gruesome details of his murders were presented in the trial.
And he is still out there to this day. Do you believe he would kill again?
He'll talk and get all of his mission. Here.
Mr. O'Donovan, are you okay?
Call for the doctor.
Shit. Call the doctor.
My grandpa got lucky. Or unlucky. Whichever way you see how people handle a stroke. He was a tough man. And after his stroke, he was stationed at the hospital for a few months. And he was discharged after a few arguments with the doctor saying, "I'm going to die in my bed, in my home, when I damn well please. And I'm not going to die here, of all places." And his demand was met about 6 years later. And that's something I'm sure he'd be happy to know. As for Trent, nobody knows where he went, what he did for the rest of his life. I'm sure he most likely did live in luxury, and the fact that he got away with what he did and never was caught again. Though no crimes were committed of similar patterns that he bestowed on his victims prior. All I know is that he's definitely dead now. Otherwise, he would be 123 years old. But knowing that someone like him is gone, that's a great feeling. Until